Welcome everybody to episode number 299 of Goulet Q&A, where fountain pens are still a thing. 299, that's kind of crazy, right? 300's right around the corner. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm Brian Goulet here from Goulet Pens, if you didn't know that already. And this week I'm going to be talking about Bock and JoWo nibs, how they're different, why that matters, what do you do about that. Reed pens, if they're like a alternate kind of pen, or where they come from, what are they? The TWSBI Pipe and the Pineider Snorkel accessories as a follow-up from talking about last week's Schaefer Snorkel. All about different dip pens. Got a lot of questions about dip pens. Y'all are a curious bunch. Swapping around BENU nibs. Hashtag it's complicated. The unimportance of pen warranty cards. And a pen spotlight on the Sailor 1911L Ninja Maki-e pens. Got a bit more of a technical kind of a Q&A this week, I guess. Lots of like nitty-gritty, in-depth questions, so I plan to go, into that. I lean into that, but I got a lot of feedback, so we'll kick it off with that. All right, starting out with Melanie Ranson says, please, please, please do a video where you buy some of the most popular normal pens and rate them like you would a fountain pen. I never thought about doing that. I would have to give that some thought, because I don't know what the most popular normal pens are. I don't know. There's probably lots of research out there and other content creators that have done that kind of a thing, but I'll give it some thought. Appreciate the suggestion. Haranaz has some feedback here. According to Richard Binder's website, Schaefer Snorkel pens, which I talked about last week, were made from 1952 to 1959, except for the Schaefer pen for men, which went from 1959 to 1968. They were introduced to combat the ballpoint, which was eating into fountain pen sales. That's right around the time they were taken over. The Snorkel allowed the pen to be refilled without getting any ink on the nib or section, thus making them closer to ballpoints in terms of convenience. So there you go. Fun little fact there. And also early ballpoints were not that reliable, not like they are today. So they would leak a lot. They had problems. So there was a long transition there where it's like you could tell ballpoints were going to take over fountain pens, but not until they reached kind of a critical mass of being more reliable and more convenient and more affordable. Because when they came out, they were every bit as expensive as fountain pens. So, and then of course now they just decimated the fountain pen in terms of commoditized goods, I guess. Anyway, Jane Pilecki says, I have at least 3 oblique double broad nib pens, and I love them all. I talked about that nib grind last week. And actually, an oblique nib is an italic nib ground on a bias, not a stub. A stub has quite rounded corners on it. Yeah, so I didn't go into depth about this last week because I was talking more about the oblique, and they're basically kind of obscure nibs. But you have italic nibs, which is it's like a stub, and then the terms get used interchangeably, which is kind of confusing in the non-nib professional grinding kind of a thing, so companies will call things italic and stub kind of interchangeably. But basically a stub is, it's taking a ball that would normally just be a round ball and sort of squishing it a little bit. You kind of grind off the top and the sides are very rounded, but you're getting, a thinner cross stroke, a thicker downstroke. Well, the sharper you make those edges, the crisper you make that line, you go from stub to cursive italic to italic. So italic it basically is going to have sharp edges that cut the paper. They're not very comfortable to write with. So a lot of people don't make them and don't offer them that way. But if you want to ground that way, you can go to a Nib Pro and they can do it that way. So what Jane's saying here is that at least Jane's experience with oblique double broads is that they're sharper corners, sharper edges than what I was referring to as a stub. I wasn't explicitly last week talking about the roundness of them, but in my experience, the oblique double, which is not many oblique double broads, but my experience is they have been a little bit more rounded. But Jane, you may have more experience with oblique double broads than I do actually. So I'll take your word for it. So it says an oblique nib is far more similar to an italic, but ground on a slant. The Lami's fabulous that I mentioned, Lamy 2000 last week. But my favorite oblique double broad is a Mont Blanc Boheme that I bought on clearance in the Mont Blanc store in 2005 for $153. You definitely ain't getting that anywhere near that today. It's nice and has a sharp edge to it. I love formal italics and obliques. They add character. Yeah, they do put a really nice line on the paper, but in my opinion, they feel terrible to write with, but I like super, super smooth nibs. But basically everything you get kind of these days from like a commercially available, grind like this would be pretty stubby. Anyway, so got some options there. So, Jane recommended, Pilot has some good double broads. If you wanted to, get it ground down, they've got on the custom 7043, custom heritage 945. I think you can also get on the custom 912. So those are some of the like more affordable gold nib options that you can then get custom ground for maybe like $40-50 probably. And then you still got a pretty reasonable price. So if you're into oblique double broads, there you go. That's how you do it. All right. Marianne Hummel says, I would love a segment on dip pens. I just got the Pilot dip pen from you at Christmas and I'm enjoying it. I got a lot of dip pen feedback and questions, so I'm going to get into dip pens a little bit today, but, there's a lot to cover with that, so I'm going to touch on some various things, but stay tuned, and see if I cover what you're looking for today, and if not, give me more feedback, because that's kind of what this is all about. All right, Rock T3D2K says, I would very much enjoy a deep dive on the various pen types: quill, fountain pen, ballpoint, roller, felt tips, and technical. I know most people don't have a handy quill feather floating around, but that was our first pen type. Sort of. More on that later. I'd also like a brief study of the different inks that can be found in those types, especially the various felt tip pens and the roller balls. There's probably plenty of info about fountain pen ink out there. Felt tips, the ink is so variable. Sharpies are the least likely to bleed in the rain and hold up to acid and high heat. Don't ask, but I put Sharpies to the test, literally. On a personal note, please keep doing these. I know that during the very interesting political season, viewership of the more niche YouTube channels probably fell off, but I'm sure most of us find channels like this is a welcome respite from all the yammering of all sides that we are getting. Well, thank you. I appreciate that feedback. I really do. I'm keeping that firmly in mind. It's like a quality over quantity kind of thing. And I got some great comments, great engagement from last week's video. So here I am again to give you more. I appreciate that. This is like a thing. I'm not looking at the numbers so much. I'm just engaging with you all. So I'm here for you. We'll do some more. All right. And then we got Jorge Nightwalker says, restaurant trick, the receipt paper, like the smooth receipt paper you use to like sign your signature after you do a credit card in a restaurant. The receipt paper is very, very smooth and ballpoint, and they're also like coated in like this waxy substance. Ballpoints stop working because ballpoints work on friction, like I talked about before. To fix this, you can grab a napkin and scribble on that with your ballpoint. So then you can add your tip and sign. So I guess once you kind of get it heated up and get it going is what Jorge's talking about here. Then when you touch it to the receipt paper, it's all kind of warmed up and ready to go. So that's a handy little trick. I've never really thought about it that deeply or tried it, but I think I will. I usually just scribble like crazy on the on the receipt when I do use it. And then last bit of feedback we have is from Holly Basuik. We appreciate you every single week for showing up and sharing little bits of your world and your passion for fountain pens. Well, thank you. So intrigued by the Noodler's Polar inks. Maybe an idea for a video, right with the pen, after putting it in the freezer for a while, to see how the ink reacts differently on paper. Does the viscosity change as it gets colder? As a Canadian environmental scientist, I would love to see a video on this before I field test it. That's interesting. So the only way that I would reasonably be able to test that would be just put it into like our freezer that we have here at work, which I think is around like 5 degrees, 10 degrees, something like that. So, it's definitely cold enough to freeze conventional ink. But it wouldn't be as cold probably as you would be field testing it, as a Canadian environmental scientist. But I definitely know other people have tested it. I've had people that have used it in like Siberia, Antarctica, places like that where it gets really cold, and it's held up pretty well. So I think it's supposed to go down to like negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, somewhere around there. So yeah, I don't know. It'd be pretty interesting and still be able to write. So that would be kind of interesting to be able to test that, to see if it like, does it perform differently? What I could do is like maybe ink it up in like 2 different pens, keep one in the freezer, one not in the freezer. I don't know. and like compare them. I'll give that some thought. Let me know if y'all would be interested in seeing me do something like that. Polar inks are kind of niche. Not everybody needs them, but when you do, nothing else will suffice. So, great feedback. Thank you all. Got a lot of good comments, and I'm reading through as many of them as I can. Let's talk about some new stuff. All right. Got some cool new things. I had a lot of new stuff last week. Got a few new things this week. We got more on the horizon. So things are definitely making up for the relatively, dry January that we had in terms of the new pen products. First off that we have is the TWSBI Eco Espresso with bronze. Here we go. More coffee themed pens, and it looks awesome. I picked one up myself. I think I have it right over here, actually. Yeah, so it looks really nice. So it's nice dark brown, not quite a like Hershey chocolate brown, but pretty darn close. So yeah, it looks really nice. Got the bronze trim on it. So it is like more of a premium kind of trim option. All the bronze trim Ecos are going to be more in that like $50 range as opposed to like the 35-ish that they normally are. But I don't know, looks great. I dig the bronze trim for, particular colors and stuff. It's got like a bronze coated nib too. So it just looks really nice. So yeah, if you're into more coffee pen themed stuff, very affordable option, great reliable pen. Big fan of that. You can get it for $49.99 at Goulet Pens. And I think it's like extra fine through broad plus 1.1 stub, I think. So yeah, lots of nib size options for you too. I love the broads on these. We also got a restock of the Sailor 1911L Ninjas, Ninja Maki-e's. I'm going to be showing that in the pen spotlight today, so I won't go on and on about it, but it's a very affordable Maki-e pen. It's got 4 different designs, all ninja themed, as the name would suggest, for just under $400. So while it is expensive, it's pretty affordable for Maki-e stuff, and they look pretty rad. So hang on, check those out later today. We also have them on our website, so you can check them out there too. I know everybody's sitting on the edge of their seat for this one. We have Monteverde Extra Fine Gel Rollerball refills now in stock. Oh yes. It's refills for the Monteverde Dakota. So, we were like, we'll try the pens, and if people, want refills for them, we can pick them up. And we got asked a little bit, and I was like, well, it makes sense because if people are going through the rollerballs, they might want the refills. The style of refill, it's a relatively common style that you can get in like, it's what I refer to as like Parker style, because you see a lot of those available in office supply stores. But we sell them. The extra fine ones are harder to come by, so we decided to pick those up and offer them. So you can check them out. We got them in black and blue ink. We got a couple new Esterbrook's. So the Esterbrook JR Pocket. These are the little guys. We have one in Fantasia, which is a limited edition. It was Fantasia came out, I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was out previously. It went away. So they've got it back for a limited time here, and then it'll be gone again. So if you missed it the first time, check it out now. It's a nice dark blue pen with some gold shimmer in it. It looks really nice. And then we have the Twinkle, which is also a JR Pocket pen. It's a lighter blue, and it has more of like a silver kind of a shimmer inside. It's like embedded in the resin. So it looks really cool. Both of them are kind of neat. So yeah, both blue pens with sparkles. Extra fine through broad plus 1.1. These are steel nibs, available for $157.50. And yeah, we got some stuff around the corner. A bunch of new inks coming too, which are kind of interesting. So be on the lookout for those. Keep an eye on the coming soon page that we have and the new arrivals page on gouletpens.com. All right, now let's do some company updates, and then I'll get to the questions. All right, so here in Central Virginia, we're getting more snow. Yay! I mean, literally, I'm shooting this on Tuesday, and they've already canceled school for tomorrow. So that's fun. So it's like we literally had cancellations last week. So I don't even know if the kids have had a full week of school yet this year. This is like, we've gotten hammered here. I know it's not as bad here in Central Virginia as it is in many other places, but we haven't had a snow day for school for the kids in 3 years. Well, and even before that, maybe even was COVID and stuff like that. I don't know. It's been a long time, and we've just really been getting clobbered this week. So we're going to be getting more snow. So hopefully it won't slow down our operations too much, but it all depends on if, the power keeps up in our area and stuff like that. I don't know. The forecast keeps swinging all over the place. So I don't know. We'll probably get something like 6 inches, maybe more. It used to be like 16 to 20 inches is what they were calling for, but that changed back to like 1 to 2 inches. It's really been all over the place. So anyway, we'll see how that goes. by the time this publishes, it might all be gone, because that's Central Virginia for you. So I won't talk about the weather anymore because you're bored and it doesn't affect you anyway, unless you live near me. Okay, we have another video that just went out. It's a shorter one. This is on how to fill a vac filling pen. So if you have experience with pens, you may be like, yeah, duh. But wanted to make a nice, concise video that just really kind of got to the point, covered some basics around the vac filling stuff, and yeah, just a good reference, sort of like I did with the vanishing point a little while back. Just trying to make some more pointed how-to content that is really referenceable and searchable on YouTube. So that's what that is. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Q&A episode number 300 next week. That's pretty wild. That's kind of a milestone. So for number 100 and 200, I did office tours. Well, we haven't really changed much in the office since episode 200, so I don't really think it would be that entertaining to do an office tour. So I have an idea for something I'm going to do next week. It's not going to be like outlandish, over the top, just giving you fair, heads up here. But I am going to do something different, something I don't do. Well, it's something I haven't really done. But yeah, it should be fun. It should be entertaining. It should still be really interesting. I'll be, telling some stories and, reminiscing a little bit, because that's what you do when you hit milestones, right? So we'll go outside the usual format, but we'll still have some fun together. So be sure to tune in next week and see what that is all about. All right, that's it. Let's get to some questions, shall we? Because that's kind of the Q part of this Q&A. So we'll do some Qs and then I'll have some As. All right, first question here is from A2755577. Your videos are a gem. Enjoy your videos much. Thank you. Learn lots from you over time. First time submitting a Q&A. So this is cool. It's part of why I want to take this question. What's the difference between Bock and JoWo nibs? Can't seem to come across a simple, straightforward explanation. Many thanks. Well, I don't know if I'll be able to give you a simple, straightforward explanation. They're two different manufacturers of nibs. So, they're mostly behind the scenes. I mean, historically, they've made nibs for lots of different pen companies, kind of like white label or OEM is what it's called. So they're basically, a what's it called? A part that is bought and then is bought by the manufacturer. The manufacturer puts it on their pen. It'll have the manufacturer's branding on it, all that kind of stuff. It's only relatively in like the last 10, maybe 15 years, I think, that spare nibs, like nib units and things like that, have been sold like more generically under like a Bock or JoWo name, and then been able to like swap them out onto different pens and stuff like that. So the reason it's difficult to nail down and give like a simple answer as to what they are is because they make a lot of different types of nibs, and there's not just like one set standard they have for everything. So the simplest explanation I can give is that probably when you're hearing about Bock or JoWo, you're hearing like, these are both German manufacturers, both pretty high quality. They're really among the top nib manufacturers in the world. You have certain brands like, Pilot, Sailor, Lamy, who will, make their own nibs, but, and they're kind of proprietary. There's others that do that too, for sure. But in terms of manufacturers that are making nibs for other companies, they're definitely, those two are like the premier ones that everybody's kind of heard of. So usually what people are referring to when they're talking about those is like, there's some like standard of quality, some expectation, like you're going to get a pretty decent nib when you get one of these brands. Now there's all different types of nibs, like all different types. It's kind of crazy, but the standard ones you're looking at are what are called like the number 6 nib. That's like the larger size one that's, looks kind of like this. It's got a housing, it's got a nib, it's got a feed. And the two companies will have kind of a standard setup like this. And if you're, a pen maker or whatever, you buy these from Bock or JoWo, and then you sort of build a pen around it, right? So you've got your grip that you put on there. You make a body of a certain style. It's got a converter, it's standard international converter, which is the more universal of the converter types. And you sort of build a pen around this nib unit. So if you start with a Bock or a JoWo, that has like good German consistency, quality, stuff like that, that's a pretty solid framework. So that's why a lot of pen brands, a lot of manufacturers who maybe aren't like big enough to make their own in-house nibs, it's a good move for them to buy a pretty well-known, respected nib from a company like Bock or JoWo. So yeah, that's why you hear that name a lot. But what's the difference between the two of them? Well, it's like there's sometimes one will have like a slight innovation over another one. There was a minute there where Bock had a titanium nib, like a titanium flex nib. I don't know. I think they still have it. I'm not totally sure. So that was a thing that JoWo didn't have for a while. JoWo came out with a steel flex nib that they have that we offer. I don't know that Bock has anything like that. So there's a little bit of back and forth, some healthy competition that they do with each other. But largely a lot of it has to do with like their backlog, their availability. It seems like every 5 to 10 years, it'll kind of swing one direction or the other, that like one will be like the more popular, the more respected one, and it might swing back a little bit depending on all kinds of factors. But either way, both are pretty solid. So the biggest difference between the two in terms of what matters to you as like just a fountain pen user, the biggest difference between the two is going to be for compatibility when like changing out a nib on a pen or swapping it between different pens. And the reason that it's going to matter is because when you buy a standard housing like this, the shape of it, the thread pattern and all that is different between Bock and JoWo. So if you have a pen that is sort of built around one, like we have an Edison Premier here, Edison standardizes around JoWo. So if I have a JoWo housing and nib, I can just unscrew it and screw in a different one, easy peasy. Well, if I go with another brand, this is, I've got a BENU here, and I'm going to talk about BENU later because I have a question more specifically about this. Well, they use Schmidt, which is actually a third one that's even more different, but they're another German nib company. So they use a different thread pattern than both Bock and JoWo. So I can't just screw in a nib unit into my BENU, with some exception, more on that later. But that's really the biggest difference when we're talking about that on our website, or you're seeing people talk about it and reviewing things and stuff like that. It has to do with compatibility. Now, with like the standard nibs, the number 6 size nibs, usually you can pull the nib out of there. The feeds are going to be slightly different, but between Bock and JoWo, if it's like a standard size, like a number 6 or number 5, something like that, you can usually pull the nib, the metal nib out and swap that onto the other one. So even if the threading pattern of the housing and all that is not compatible, oftentimes you can yank the nib out and swap them that way. It takes a little bit more confidence, a little bit more kind of mindfulness to be able to do that well, but it is feasible. So this is why you very quickly get to a place where things get confusing, is because things are not super standardized in the nib world. You would think they would be, but they are not. And so when it comes to trying to do anything other than just getting a pen and using it, anytime you're trying to upgrade or alter or replace or do anything like that, swap stuff between pens, you're immediately into like experimentation territory pretty much, because they don't make these things to be swappable with each other. So that's where it gets kind of confusing, is because there's a lot of different things, a lot of different standards that may be different, and they don't always have like all the technical specifications about what makes them different. So they may even look similar, but like the thickness of the nib material may be different from one pen to another. So you may not be able to swap them, even though it looks identical. So stuff like that gets kind of confusing sometimes. But that's why we have question, and answer sessions like this, so that we can try to get to some of that. And I will be covering BENU later because they are more complicated than most. So there you go. Hopefully that helps you out. You don't really need to worry too much about one or the other unless you're worrying about compatibility. Next question, Donna G says, some time ago I read about a type of pen that was made out of some kind of plant material, reed maybe? So I'm wondering if this was really a thing. If it was, did it come before or after those made from quill feathers? So we're going a little historical here. So yes, it is a thing. You can make them out of reeds. You can make them out of bamboo. That's what I see a lot. I mean, technically, I don't think bamboo's a reed. I think it's a grass. I'm not totally sure about that. But anyway, so is bamboo technically a reed? I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. But anyway, so reed pens actually came first. So bamboo pens, reed pens, whatever, the pens made out of that type of thing, goes back to, I think, around the 4th century BC. So used for, even before writing on any type of paper, you had cuneiform, which is like, making marks into clay tablets, basically. It's the oldest form of writing that we have, documented, basically. So these, reed pens, kind of like this here, and I'll show you this more close up in a second. These would be used to sort of like dig into the clay and sort of carve out the clay. That was the original form of a, pen, so to speak. But then as cuneiform kind of sunsetted and you got into papyrus and being able to write on, a form of paper, that's where ink became a thing. And you ended up with sort of these reed pens that sort of transitioned over, where you deal with ink and you would write with these. So, it goes way back. Like, I don't know exactly when the feather quill thing started out, but I think you're talking like much later, like 2,000 years later after, if you're talking all the way back to like 4th century BC, you're talking, maybe 15th, 16th century, something like that. Much longer. And then the quill was like the dominant thing for quite some time, until you had modern metallurgy that came out and metal nibs started to replace feather quills. Basically it's all about durability. So like feather quills became more popular because, the reed pens and bamboo pens, stuff like that, well, when they get wet, they lose some of their durability. And then when you're scraping, you're writing and stuff like that, they would wear out relatively quickly. They were the best tool that they had at the time, but they would have to remake them constantly. So, you kind of had to make them very specifically. The way you have to make these things is you have to soak it and get it wet so that when you cut it and you work it, it doesn't split and crack on you. It's kind of its own art form just to make the darn things. So when the feather thing came out, they lasted longer, they were more flexible, and more durable. So it really was a superior way to write for kind of like the average person. But the bamboo, like the reed pens, they haven't fully gone away. You can actually get them today even. This is technically not one of them. This is actually a tool that is used for like Maki-e work, where you like put like gold powder on and stuff like that. It's kind of a little tool for that. But it's the same basic shape and concept. So it's the closest thing I have to kind of demonstrate for you. I'll show it to you close up and you can at least get somewhat of an idea of what I'm talking about here. All right, here we go. So, basically you have, it's cut on a slant like this. It would be cut kind of flat like this. So it's actually still kind of used today for like calligraphy. And, if you're doing any type of, antique kind of older writing style, traditional writing style, I guess is the word. I think you would have this, and I believe you would try and cut like a slit down the middle, just like you would a nib. Not totally sure about that. And then you would dip it, just like you would anything else. And then you write with it and you're just dipping it constantly. And it's sort of soaking up some of the ink. It sort of holds onto it a bit. So it functions, but it's just for modern writing. It's not the most ideal thing to have, and they do wear out. So not the most popular thing, but certainly it's out there. I believe you can find them at like art supply stores and things like that, because there is specific styles of calligraphy and stuff like that where something traditional like this would be warranted. But we don't sell any of them, and you could make your own. You can go down a rabbit hole and figure out how to make these. I'm sure there's YouTube videos out there. So yeah, there you go. That's it. That's as far as my knowledge goes on these things. And yeah, kind of interesting. A little bit of history. Next question. Ivan Upton says, while the Schaefer snorkel that you showed last week was neat, what about the snorkel accessories, like the TWSBI Pipe or the Pineider Snorkel, both of which I believe you sell? Yeah, I didn't even think to mention these because when I got the question last week, they were talking about snorkel fillers, like filling mechanisms inside the pen. My brain did not even go to like some accessory tool that was kind of similar in concept, but not built into the pen. So I'm glad you brought it up. I can talk about it real quick because it is kind of similar in concept. So basically, if you didn't see last week or you don't know what I'm talking about, or you're confused by the thumbnail because I had a snorkel on me. Basically, the idea is you have a little tube that comes out of the pen and fills from, the bottom of a almost empty ink bottle, or allows it so that you don't have to dip, the whole nib or especially the grip, in the ink to be able to fill your pen. Just keeps it a little cleaner. So that's kind of the same inspiration, kind of the same idea behind, the TWSBI Pipe and the Pineider Snorkel. So I'm going to show you those, explain kind of how they work, just so you can see them if you've never seen them before. All right, so this is the TWSBI Pipe. The Pineider Snorkel is very similar. And in fact, I do not have a snorkel on hand, so I'm going to have to show you an image of that one. The concept is going to be pretty similar, though. You have a long tube, just a hollow tube, which is used to suck up the ink. And then you have the adapter kind of portion on the end here, which is meant to go onto the various pens or accoutrements that they're designed for. So TWSBI designs theirs for a couple different reasons. It fits a couple different things. So you have the standard international converter, which is the most common converter out there on most pens. It slides on here just like it would slide onto the back of your nib housing unit, right? So it's got a little post on there. Similarly, so it really just slides on there as if you were installing it on a pen. And so then it allows you to just basically have a big tube. So because you're taking the converter out of the pen, you're then not submerging your nib or your feed or anything like that. So you can just stick it in your ink, do your piston thing and suck up all the ink, and then your converter gets filled with ink. You can take it off and then you can install it on your pen. Pretty easy. TWSBI, because they're TWSBI and they can design it however they want. They also made it for the 580 and the Mini. So you can actually remove the grip section off of there, which is pretty cool. And then, the outer part here will actually fit inside the pen body. So you remove that nib unit and then you can go and you can fill, your body, your whole piston body with ink. And then once that's full, you can reinstall your grip. It's just threaded right on there. And then you can go on and you can write. Nib is perfectly dry and good to go. So yeah, that's kind of neat. But it only fits kind of these things, but it's only $10. So it's actually pretty affordable. So, it's not going to be for everybody. For me personally, I don't end up using it all that much. And the reason is because it's actually a little bit easier for me to just ink up the pen and sort of wipe off the nib than it is because, like, if I'm at my desk or whatever, I can't like rinse this thing out. So if I fill a pen at my desk, I then have to remember, because my situation at work here is the kitchen where we have our pen cleaning station is clear on the other side of the building from my office. So I have to walk all the way across the building just to kind of rinse this thing out. So, and it's very likely I may sit on a cup on my desk, not unlike some other things here, where it's like, oh, I need to clean that out. I need to do whatever. And it just kind of sits there for days/weeks. So that's one consideration to make. Your situation, maybe you're near some water and it's not that big a deal to do that. So totally valid. It has a very specific use, but what it does well. Now the Pineider one, I'll show you the picture here. The Pineider one has different steps on it. And it's meant to be a little more universal. So basically it's really for converters. So you can fit things like a Pilot converter, like a Lamy converter, some of the major brands. That's what those steps are all for. Only downside, it's $34 as opposed to $10. So it's a bit more expensive. I will say I have a video on the original Pineider Snorkel, which was less expensive. I think it was around $20. And it had a rubber O-ring that kind of fit. So they changed the design. The price had to go up a little bit. So it's not quite the same as it used to be, but basically in concept is similar to the way the TWSBI Pipe works. And it sort of like snorkelifies your pen. So if you weren't aware that that was a thing, now you know. And I'm glad that you brought it up, Ivan, because I totally forgot about it. But there you go. Okay, Rob Rom 9080 says, On shimmer inks, wouldn't you think that you can have the best of both worlds since you don't have that shade? So you can have that shade or sheen with the shimmering if you shake the bottle. Sorry, I'm getting confused here. Wouldn't you think that you can have the best of both worlds since you can have the shimmer if you shake the bottle, but not have it if you don't shake the bottle? So that's essentially what the question is getting at here. If you don't shake up your bottle, and get the shimmering particulate kind of all working throughout the ink, don't you basically just have plain regular ink? So you can sort of siphon the plain ink off the top, not disrupt any of the shimmer on the bottom, and then you have the option to have shimmer or not with a given ink. So it's a decent question, and the answer is kind of. So my experience has been that even if you don't shake the bottle, there's going to be some of that shimmer that stays in suspension of the ink pretty much all the time, because not all shimmer particles are identical in size exactly. And some types of shimmer are, fall out of suspension more. They're a little heavier maybe, and they will sink down and separate more. Other ones, they don't settle out quite as much, and they kind of remain in suspension of the ink. It also has to do with the chemistry of the ink. If they put more stuff that's meant to help keep things in suspension, different surfactants and things like that, that can help keep it in suspension. So the answer is some inks, you'll probably get that effect a little bit better than others. But most inks, I would expect that you're not going to eliminate shimmer by just not shaking the bottle, but it would be reduced. So I would say in some ways, and especially if you have a paper that's maybe a little more absorbent, you'll probably get the effect on a lot of inks of not having shimmer. If you are using a finer nib, say, a slightly more absorbent paper, and you're not shaking the bottle, then you can kind of get away with, essentially having two different properties of the ink. And then if you want, you can, with some extra assistance, maybe a little help with a wetter nib, with a different paper, and you want to shake out the bottle, then you can get it. But the only thing I'll say about that is if you're going to do that on a regular basis and you're going to use a lot of the ink without shaking up the shimmer that's in the bottom, essentially what you're doing is you're increasing the concentration of the shimmer in the remaining ink that's in the bottle. So if you're using a lot of it without shaking it up, then that means your shimmer is going to get really intense the lower the ink level gets in your bottle. Maybe that's what you want, though. Maybe that'd be kind of cool. I don't know. So I would say give it a shot. It seems like you could do that, but I wouldn't say that you should just get all shimmer inks because you're getting two inks in one. Basically, if you're getting a shimmer ink, you're okay, and you're gonna pretty much have shimmer in it all the time, just maybe to slightly varying degrees. So anyway, all right. Tarilla Beth says, question, what can you tell me about dip pens? I watch a whole lot of videos, and it seems like everybody is using different dip pens, all the different dip pens. But could it be the same dip pens or the same brand? I mean, I have no idea. One person commented that they like their silver nib better than their brass nib because it worked better for them. And then the next video, someone using a glass dip pen. And then the next video is using one that they have different nibs for, which is cool or seems cool, but is it really cool? I have no idea. Thanks. I feel you on that. It is kind of confusing, and I am not the dip pen expert here. So I'm going to warn you on that. I may just confuse you further. But I can at least show you a couple of different things and show you kind of what's going on, share some thoughts. So I won't be exhaustive here. I won't show you every different type because there's so many dip pens out there. But I can at least explain sort of what's going on so you can get a lay of the land. So dip pens in their essence, the reason they're called dip pens is because they do not have a reservoir of ink inside the pen. Like a ballpoint or rollerball would have a refill. A fountain pen would have a cartridge or converter or something that has an ink chamber inside the pen. A dip pen, there's no ink chamber, there's no refill. You have a separate bottle or little whatever container of ink that you have to dip in, you write with it, and it only holds the ink kind of on the nib, and then you have to dip it pretty frequently. That was the major revelation. The reason fountain pens are called fountain pens is because it was kind of game changing to have a pen that had an internal reservoir of ink so that ink could just flow out of it like a fountain. That's kind of where the fountain pen name came from. Before that, everybody was just dipping and dipping and dipping and dipping and dipping and dipping. That was life. That's what you did because that's all you had. That was all your options. So anyway, dip pens are still a thing, but they are much more niche now. Much more niche. Basically just kind of used for calligraphy. So you have different types of dip nibs, and they have tons of different purposes because there's a lot of different types of calligraphy. There's a lot of different scripts that people write with, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. So there's a lot of different nib shapes and types and materials and stuff like that. Now, we don't have an extensive offering of dip pen things, dip nibs and stuff like that at Goulet Pens because we're fountain pen people. And while you can use fountain pen ink with a lot of different types of dip pens, that's not primarily what most dip pens are made for. Most dip pens are made for calligraphy ink, which is thicker. Some benefits of that is the thicker ink, that it's sort of like hangs onto the nib a little bit longer, so it'll last a little bit longer than like a really watery kind of runny fountain pen ink. Thicker calligraphy ink will dry more on the top of the paper and won't soak in. That can be better for a couple of different reasons. It can give you more light fastness, so you can have more, when you're not having to flow through a feed, like with capillary action, you don't have to worry about clogging quite as much. You don't have to, worry about flow as much. There's still flow, but it's just flow off the nib. It's not through a whole like system inside the pen, like a fountain pen. So dip pens can be really good for using inks that have some unique properties. You can use ones that have like truly a gold or silver shimmery kind of a thing. You can lay it on really thick. So if you're doing like place cards or something really nice looking on a really nice paper, the ink dries on top of it and it gets almost kind of like a 3D effect, like a texture that you can feel the ink that as it's dried on the paper. That's got its own desirable qualities. So there's a lot of advantages in certain ways to using dip pens, but it's definitely more hassle to do so. The context of most of the dip pens that we use typically and what we offer is really for fountain pen ink. And most of the time, I think the reason people are getting it is to test out their inks. They get samples, they get, different things, maybe want to test out some different papers maybe, and they basically don't want to have to ink up fountain pens and clean them out over and over and over again. So particularly a glass pen or something like a Kakimori, I'm going to show you all these in a second, but they can be really handy because they're so easy to clean. So if you're going through a lot of inks in one sitting, a dip pen is definitely more convenient to do that. And certain dip pens will write a little bit more like a fountain pen, so it kind of emulates it pretty well. Saves you a lot of time of having to clean them and stuff like that. I wouldn't take a glass dip pen on an airplane and try and write a novel, while I'm traveling. That would not be very convenient. But if I'm sitting at my desk and testing out different inks, sure, I'll use a dip pen. It can be convenient for that. So I'll show you a few of the different ones that I have, give you somewhat of an idea of what makes them what they are. But ultimately, if you really want to get into dip pens and stuff like that, you're going to get exposed to a lot of different random things because there are a ton of brands, a ton of different offerings, and it gets pretty specialized too. And you really get more into the world of calligraphy. But I'll at least tell you what we have, what you can expect, and what they're good for. All right, got a bunch of dip pens here. Now, this is not exhaustive of everything, and we don't sell all of these, but I do just want to kind of show you the general types that you're getting into. So I mentioned this one earlier today. This is like a reed pen or, a bamboo pen. You'll see it called different things, but essentially it's a natural material that is cut and shaped, and you can, dip it and write with ink, and it gets a very specific look to it. But that is technically a dip pen. Something like this is not as great for changing a lot of ink colors and stuff because it's going to kind of soak up the ink a little bit, but it is an option. I don't have with me a feather quill, which is funny because whenever I tell people oh yeah, I sell fountain pens, half the time, if they don't know what a fountain pen is, they'll be like, oh, is that the thing with a feather on it? And I'm like, sure, unless I have time to really explain it. I'm like, yeah, basic, somewhat, yeah, you're going back a little too far in history, but sure, why not? So the feather quill, that's another type of dip pen. Not a lot of people are using feather quills these days. More commonly, what you're going to see in the calligraphy world is some sort of holder that has like this, this little, friction-based, whoops, that just pulled right out. This is like a gift thing. I don't even know who makes this, but that's not supposed to come out of the pen. This is supposed to be able to, oh boy. There you go. That's supposed to be able to stay seated in the pen. And you're supposed to, just be able to swap out these nibs. Now, these nibs are not the same types of nibs like you would have in a fountain pen. These are not stainless steel, generally. I mean, maybe they make some, but it's what's called spring steel. So it's a lower grade steel. They can pound it thinner. They make it more flexible, but they wear out, and so you have to replace them on a pretty regular basis. But they're all kind of shaped in a similar way. It's meant to just be held in here with this tension thing, so you can kind of just like shove it in there. And then you dip and you can write. And, I don't know if you can see, but like that thing is very kind of flexy, like that thing flexes right out. This doesn't work so great with fountain pen ink. It works better with like a thicker calligraphy ink. But that's the basic idea, is you can get this, and you can get all different types of nibs. This is a very, very small sampling of some that I have. This is it's more like an italic style. And this one has this little funky hat on top of it here. It's called a reservoir. So that can hold on to a little extra ink. So when you dip it, it just lasts a little bit longer. So some dip nibs, you can get that on there. Other ones, this is like a finer point maybe that's like more flexible. Other ones, have different things, and this one does something else different. I don't really know the difference between all these, but you can get different ones. They can write in all kinds of different ways. There's a ton of variety of these types of like interchangeable, kind of nibs that are made to go with, what's called a pen holder. That's also confusing because, originally this was called the pen back in the day, and these are called pen holders. But then, we call these nibs in the fountain pen world. So you're like, oh, it's the nib. It's like, well, yeah, but this is called a pen holder. It's confusing. So anyway, there's that style. Here's another funky one. Look at this thing. So this is the same concept as this, but this is called an oblique pen holder. Why would you have something like this? Well, it's meant so that you hold it like a normal pen, but it has it at more of an angle so that when you're writing in things like copperplate or Spencerian or certain scripts that are very specific about the slant and the angle that's used, and they're meant to have line variation and be able to write like with a flex kind of a thing. This has got like a flexy nib kind of in here. You can see that kind of springing out like that. So it's meant to hold it at more of an angle so that as you're writing, you're getting that more appropriate angle with it. I mean, technically you could achieve it by moving your hand with a straight, holder like this, and you can write like that. And essentially when we do fountain pens, that's kind of how we're doing it too, or you turn your paper more or whatever. But this is like a very traditional style made for certain types of scripts that make it, I don't know, somewhat more easier or more whatever to be able to write in that style. So you'll see this around sometimes. Not a lot of people are testing fountain pen inks with these, so you may not see these quite as much, but you'll see this a ton in the calligraphy world. Now to things that we actually carry at Goulet pens. So this is the Pilot Iro Utsushi. So this is the, essentially a pen holder in a similar fashion to what you have, with something like these nibs. But this has a Pilot stainless steel fountain pen nib in it. It doesn't have a feed. It doesn't have an ink reservoir, anything like that. But it does have a Pilot nib that you would get on something like a Kakuno, a Metropolitan, an Explorer, similar nib. Except, it's made to fit inside a dip thing. So same kind of thing, like it will work with fountain pen ink. It will not last quite as long, as if it had a feed and all that kind of stuff. But it can be really good for testing out different inks and stuff like that, or if you want to change inks a lot. What's cool about this is it's literally a fountain pen nib. So if you want to see what an ink looks like when written with a fountain pen, this can be a great option to do that. Because you're literally using the same nib as you would if it was on a Metropolitan or something like that. So that's an option there. This right here is Kakimori. So this is a kind of a specific tool. This is like the brand is Kakimori who makes this thing. So it is a dip nib, but it's machined to be a little bit more like a glass pen in that it has multiple flutes that go down. Still works sort of by capillary action. But when you dip it, it holds ink in all these flutes. And then when you put nib to paper, you know, the ink will come out of there. And so what it means is when you go to write with this thing, if you hold it up really high, you can write more like a regular nib. And if you hold it flatter and more of it's making contact, you can get like a really broad, like swath of ink. So this can be really cool for certain types of artwork where you want to get more like, you know, broad swaths. It's a versatile nib. It'll last maybe a little bit longer because it is holding a bunch of ink in these flutes. So as you write with it, if you're writing more conventionally, you can like turn it and get to different flutes and kind of keep turning it. Maybe get a little more life out of it so you don't have to dip it quite as often. I don't know which one you're talking about in the original question that you had here. You know, silver nib better than the brass nib. So my experience, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like this is just literally with the two nibs that I have, the Kakimoris. This is the antique brass finish. I find that this writes a little drier than the solid stainless steel Kakimori nib that I have. I don't know if that's a universal experience for everybody, but when you mention that, that might be what that is. It's like, oh, depending on the finish of the nib, it might hold on to ink more, flow a little bit differently. So it can be, not just with Kakimori, but like with other nibs too, it may be that the material, the finish that's on the nib can actually affect its flow, you know, not insignificantly with dip pens. And then last but not least, we have the glass pen. This is like the OG dip pen that we have carried at Goulet Pens literally from the beginning. So this is Rowan Klingner one, but J. Urban is another one that's pretty popular. They have different options, but this is all just, you know, same concept as a Kakimori. It has flutes in here that hold on to the ink. You dip it in the ink. The flutes fill with ink as you write with it. You know, this one is not made to write in a broad swath. It's really meant to be written at the tip, so it's more conventional, like a fountain pen nib looking thing. It might write a little bit wetter, but it holds all that ink in the flutes, so it's going to get more mileage than you would with something like this. So glass pens can be really good. We use them, you know, for various purposes at Goulet Pens for ink testing and stuff like that. There's other types out there, but these are some of the ones I'm more familiar with, some of the ones you're more likely to maybe come across. But yeah, that's what I got. And hopefully that helps somewhat. If you're using fountain pen ink, these are the ones that are going to be the more helpful ones for you. All right, got a question here from Follow Your Brush. I do have a question. Is it possible to switch out a BENU nib? My fine nib is scratchy. I'd prefer a medium. I'm sorry, your fine nib is scratchy. It's not necessarily supposed to be that way. So that may be a whole other thing. But say you want to change nib size, say you want to do a different thing, that's totally fine. I'm going to refer back a little bit earlier when we were talking about the difference between Bock and JoWo, because with BENU, hashtag it's complicated. So BENU has nothing to do with Bock, but BENU uses Schmidt, or at least they started out using Schmidt for their housings and nibs. That's what they built it all, the whole company off of, and you know I'll show you in close up in detail in here in a second, but Schmidt has a whole other housing and threading pattern and stuff than both Bock and JoWo. So it's like a third element that is kind of different. Even though the nib itself is like number 6 and looks more standard, there's some little quirks and weird things that make them not as compatible with the other two. And I'll show you what I can of that in a second. But basically the fine, medium, and broad BENUs are all Schmidt. But they recently expanded into stub nibs and into flex nibs, which are made by JoWo. Now, they're not totally compatible. So what BENU has done for the pens that they wanted to be able to offer the number 6 stub and flex nibs is they actually had to make a different grip with a different threading so that the housing would fit and all that. Now we're getting complicated. I'm going to show you because it's going to be easier to explain as I'm showing you what's going on. But in short, before we get all into it, the TLDR is if you're trying to swap between a fine, medium, or broad BENU, it's going to be a Schmidt nib. That's going to be pretty straightforward. We even sell the Schmidt nib housing units. It's $25 for the whole shebang. You can just unscrew it, swap it out, screw it in with a different one. You're good to go. New life to your pen or whatever, different nib size, all that kind of things. Super easy. It's if you're going from a fine, medium, or a broad and you're going to a stub or a flex that things get complicated real quick. So I'm going to show you why it gets complicated and show you how to maybe work around it a little bit. So here's some nib nerdery if you're ready. All right, getting some good mileage out of the second camera here today. All right, I got a BENU here. This is an exclusive of ours, the Euphoria in Earl Grey. Part of the reason I chose this one is because it has a fairly translucent grip, so it's a little easier to see what's going on. This is not the case with all BENUs. This is a Schmidt nib. You can tell because it says it right on there, Schmidge. But if I want to take out the whole unit, I can show you what's going on. Here, let me take out the converter first because that will make it easier to remove the whole thing. So it's pretty easy to tell between the three, Bock, JoWo, and Schmidt, which one is a Schmidt because it's got this little brass collar on it. And the threading on these is way down at the bottom. It's like kind of a separate thing. It's a slightly different length. The nib is going to be slightly different too. But anyway, that's what this looks like. If you pull it out of your BENU, that's what you're going to see if you have a fine, medium, or broad. Just for kicks, this is a Bock. So you can see it looks kind of different. The feed itself is going to be kind of different. The nib shape overall is pretty similar. This is their titanium nib, so don't mind that. Some slight differences maybe just on the overall shape. But you can see here, I'll show you the threading upside down. Yeah, very different. Very different. So, you know, the overall length is different. The thread pattern, the pitch is different. It's really different. Not compatible at all. If I try and take a, you know, Bock housing, I literally can't even fit it into the grip of the BENU. Not compatible. I've got an Edison pen here. This is another exclusive because, you know, why not? This is a JoWo nib. That's a flex nib. And so if I unscrew the housing out of this one, I'm going to do my best to keep all these straight. That's part of the reason I chose the titanium Bock one is because it's a little easier to show. All right. There we go. Try not to get all these parts mixed up. This is a JoWo housing. So if I hold the JoWo up to Bock, you can see there, the housing is different. You know, it's got this little collar edge to it. The overall length is different. The threading is in a totally different place and is a totally different size. Not compatible at all between the two. And then you throw Schmidt in here as well. And hey, look at that. They're all three totally different in just about every way that you can imagine, even though they're all number 6 size nibs. You know, the overall nib is similar enough in some ways, but the housing is totally different between them. So not compatible, just swapping in between them like you might be able to do, you know, within a given brand, you know. So if I want to swap between other BENUs in the same housing, super easy to do, but I can't go across brands like this. Now, technically, there is a way to do it. I'm going to show you that in a second. But what I really wanted to show you for the time being is this is what BENU has been doing to be able to offer their stub and flex nibs. So Schmidt does not have those. So they standardized on Schmidt a long time ago. And all of their tooling, all of their everything is all made to fit these kind of Schmidt housings. Well, in order to offer the other ones from JoWo, what they had to do is design a different grip. Now, can you tell it's a different grip? You can if it's translucent and you are being shown on a video by a pen expert. Just looking at it, you can tell the difference, right? The threads are in a totally different place. And there's some other slight differences too. There's like this little cutout in here to accommodate, basically it's made to accommodate the JoWo housing. So on this one, you can see JoWo, this one fits inside this grip. Ta-da! There you go. So now I can use this JoWo on here. The only problem is this grip does not come on a BENU pen that comes with a fine, medium, or broad because that's Schmidt. So it gets complicated. I wish it was simpler, but this is what we have. So here I have two pens, two grips that, you know, essentially look sort of the same in terms of their nib size and all that kind of stuff. But as you can see, the inside guts, the way that it all works is going to be totally different between the two, not compatible. BENU had to basically make a whole separate grip just to be able to offer those two nib sizes, which means if you have a fine, medium, or broad, and you want to get a stub or a flex, it's not going to be compatible, which kind of stinks. But if you buy a pen that is made for a stub or a flex, it's going to have this grip on it. And then, but then if you want to take a BENU, Schmidt, fine, medium, or broad, it's not going to work on this one. So it's a little confusing. What also makes it more confusing is the fact that like the grip on just about every pen that we offer is a different color, because BENU has a lot of different colors. So we can't even like offer like a stock standard replacement grip. I mean, I guess we could if we just made it like black or something clear, I don't know. But then it wouldn't match, the pen. BENU would literally have to make different JoWo compatible grips in every color of all their pens they offer, which there's a ton of them. Not very practical. So unfortunately, you can't swap between those ones, but you can swap between fine, medium, broad, and you can swap between stub and flex. That's basically it. Now, there is a hack. This is, a little life hack sort of thing. If you leave the housing in here for your Schmidt, and you want to put the JoWo in here, you can sort of do it. Okay? So if I pull the nib and the feed out, or say I leave the feed in, because I want to leave it in because it's compatible with this housing, and I want to yank, this is confusing having this in the other BENU. I'm going to get this out of here. So let's have this in my Edison, right? So if I have that in here, so that housing is in there, right? Say I want to yank out the JoWo nib from my, Edison pen. So I'm going to yank that out, leave the feeds where they are. If I take the nib and try and put it in this housing with this feed, it's not going to fit. It'll sort of fit down to a point, but then it'll sort of get stuck. And I would have to really jam it in there, and essentially I'm bending the nib and probably going to ruin it, trying to jam it in there. So even swapping it between there, it's not really going to work. That kind of stinks. Now, if I want to go the other way, say I want to take a Schmidt and I want to put it into a JoWo. I mean, I can sort of do it. However, I got a problem. So the feed is not the same, and the nib is not the same. So it's ever so slightly different. So here's my Schmidt nib, and here's my JoWo nib. At first glance, they kind of look similar, right? But if I really get up in here, and this is hard to do, but you can see they're not the same length. They're both number 6. They're called number 6. Number 6 has to do with like the width. I don't know 100% what the standard is, but the width of the base of the nib, so the diameter there. However, the length is different, which matters with feed compatibility. And then this might be kind of hard to tell, but the wings themselves go wider on the JoWo nib than they do on the Schmidt. So that's why when I try and fit this onto, this housing with the feed, I can't get it in all the way because the wings are wider. And that has to do with the width of the inside here of the housing. Now I was like, let me see if I can really experiment here. Let me take the JoWo feed, and I'm only doing this because I've got experience with this. You would probably get totally confused if you took all your pens apart like this, so I wouldn't advise. If I take the JoWo feed and nib out of the housing, which is what you would do if you had a JoWo flex nib and you wanted to put it on a BENU that came with a fine or medium or broad, I can put that in there. I can sort of jam it in, and it actually kind of goes in. So that's sort of my life hack. You would need to get a JoWo replacement nib and feed, a whole housing unit, and then you would need to pull the nib and feed out of the housing, out of the bottom part, and then you can replace that into your Schmidt, BENU setup here. And I think it would work reasonably okay. I have not tested it to see how the flow over time works and all that, but it seems to be reasonably compatible. The thing that kind of stinks is like, this is a Goulet nib, right? Which we only offer these as standalone nibs. And as I just showed you, if you're using a Schmidt, what's it called? Feed, it won't fit in there. So you can't just take your BENU, with a Schmidt, get a Goulet nib and fit it in there. It's not going to work because of the feed and because of the housing. So this is why it's so freaking complicated for us to try to explain, what is compatible with what, because these were not made to be doing this. We're sort of life hacking. We're sort of making it work. But this is pretty bizarre and pretty complicated and not really made to work. So you're lucky if you can get it to work, but basically Schmidt's made to go with Schmidt, Bock's made to go with Bock, JoWo's made to go with JoWo, and that's it. And this is of the more standardized nib types out there. You go with like other brands like Lamy and Pilot and all that kind of stuff. It's like freaking forget it. It's just not made to be that compatible. But if you just are determined and you want to try and make it work, you can play around, you can do different things. But anyway, that's sort of how that works. So very long roundabout answer. Technically, your question was about swapping a fine with a medium, which the short answer is you just get a different nib unit and you can screw it in and screw it out. I could have just answered it simply like that, but I like to make things complicated. So I went all into this. Honestly, I was just curious for myself to see what was compatible and what wasn't. It's a mess. But anyway, now you know some more. You can go back and watch this segment over and over again. You can ask my team. But that's it. So there you go. More information is helpful, I guess, maybe. Anyway, I hope that helps. All right, last question of this week here. I have one from Kirby Nix. Says, good morning, Brian. A quick question popped into my head right before I saw last week's video go live. And you seem like the perfect person to ask given your extensive experience in the fountain pen retail world and your propensity to go into deep dives, which I may or may not have just done literally on the last question. Okay. Warranty cards. Woo! How important is it to fill them out when you get a new pen? I personally have never filled out a warranty card for any of my pens. I am too eager to just ink up the pen and start writing with it, and have never gotten around to filling out the cards. I have not been able to find any information on this specific topic. Every time I try and research it, I just get information about people trying to verify the authenticity of pens based on the warranty card. So should you fill out a warranty card as soon as you get a new pen? If you don't, what are the potential ramifications? Not the sexiest topic, I know, but I felt it could be important. Thanks again for all your work in the fountain pen world. I have an order from Goulet pens that's supposed to be delivered today, which I'm rather looking forward to. Well, thank you, Kirby. I appreciate the support there. Thanks for supporting me and my team. Warranty cards. Okay, so the reason you're not finding a lot of information about them is because they're really not that important these days. I can't say that for every situation, but basically, and I don't know like all the history of warranty cards and all that kind of stuff, but here's just my kind of based on my kind of experience and my summation of them. Warranty cards kind of serve two purposes, like way back in the day, back before you had electronic records and all this kind of stuff. Most people were like paying in cash or maybe credit card, but there wasn't like whole systems in place, for easily keeping track of record of sales like you have with, most point of sale systems and online retail today. We can look back and see, if you have an account with us, you can go back and look at your account history. We can look at it too. So we have a record of everything that you've bought. So like a warranty card doesn't really do that much these days. It makes more sense in like a brick and mortar type scenario, where you're like not putting in all your information. You don't have your email and phone number and all that kind of stuff. There's no way for them to get in contact with you. You just like, I want to buy the pen. Even if you buy it with a credit card, it's not necessarily so easy to match that up to the individual and all that kind of stuff. Basically the manufacturer doesn't have any of that information. So, you're a little more off the grid, I guess, would be the way to go. From a manufacturer's perspective, not only do they not have a way to like contact you or anything, but if you reach out to them and say, hey, I have this pen, blah, 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 they don't know if you're the original purchaser. They don't know if it's even a legit pen. It could be a counterfeit. It could be a knockoff. It could be something that you bought from an unauthorized retailer. They don't really have a good way to know that unless you do the warranty card. So really the warranty card was designed for when you were buying a product, not just in pen world, but really anywhere. But if you were buying a product and you needed to like verify with the manufacturer that it was from an authorized retailer, that you were the original purchaser, all that kind of stuff, you would fill out that card, send it to the manufacturer. They have your information on file there. That way, no matter what happens to the retailer, wherever, you're like, I bought it at a kiosk in a in an airport. You know, it's like, I don't know who the retailer was. I just bought it because I liked it. And if you wanted to still have like a support on that, you would essentially be like in direct communication with the manufacturer on it, so that in the case that you would have a future problem with the pen, they would have your information. It would just expedite the process and make it a little bit smoother. So in that respect, it can be helpful to have a warranty card. But that said, like most fountain pens that we sell, especially in the lower price ranges, they don't even have warranty cards. Like it's not even a thing that's included with a lot of them. On the more expensive pens, like gold nib pens, you'll start to see them more. But these days it's kind of superfluous. It's not that essential unless there's like maybe a really brick and mortar centric brand, more of a collector's item, you know, kind of a thing. Certainly brands, I would imagine like Mont Blanc. I don't sell Mont Blanc, but I would imagine they would be more the ones to have that kind of a thing and really push for it. But what I can say is I don't think we've had any situation. I've never heard from a customer, or at least that I can recall, that has ever been rejected for a warranty because they didn't fill out the card. You know, especially because like we have a system of record for all your sales. We can verify, you know, we're authorized retailers for every brand, you know, that we carry. So we sort of like vouch for you or can help even like get you in communication with the manufacturer, whatever. So it's just, you know, that little card, not as necessary. Another thing I can say is like, not in the pen world, but like other things like appliances and, you know, stuff like that you might have warranty information for. Part of the reason they want you to fill out those warranty cards is so the manufacturer has your direct contact information so they can market to you, basically. Like this is, you know, at least in America here, you know, they want to be able to send you, you know, things, or if there's, you know, consumables and stuff like that, like if you have a refrigerator and it's got a water filter on it, they want you to register that refrigerator for warranty purposes. That way they can send you information about the OEM, you know, the original, the filters, or, you know, if it's a printer and they want to sell you printer ink or whatever. If you register that product and warranty it, well, now they have your direct contact information. They can market directly to you. Whereas if they're selling to, you know, Walmart or Target or Amazon or whatever, you know, they don't know who's buying what, because that information doesn't necessarily go back to the manufacturer. That information will be at like the retailer level. But yeah, so they like to have more direct contact with you as well for marketing purposes. Go figure. So anyway, that's not really big in the pen world. I've never heard of that getting pushed very hard. And so it's, you know, in the fountain pen world, I wouldn't really sweat it too much. I would only sweat it if you question the source where you're buying it from. You know, if you're buying it, you know, it seems like too good of a price that you're getting on Amazon or something like that, you know, and it comes with a warranty card, maybe reach out to the manufacturer and say like, hey, is this thing legit? Like, you know, can I register this, and just make sure you have that support there, because otherwise you might just be pretty much on your own. So anyway, yeah, there you go. Hopefully that helps. That's it for the questions I have. Now we're going to do a spotlight. So I got a pen spotlight for the Sailor 1911L Ninja Maki-e. So I'm going to show you those things right now. They're pretty cool. And yeah, enjoy that. All right, so let's check out these new Sailor 1911 Ninja Maki-es. They're not that new. We had them last year, but we got so few of them, they just went immediately. There's 4 different types. They're all the 1911L model, so that's the, you know, standard size. It's like the mid-size. So you have the 1911S, which is like a Pro Gear slim size. You have this one in the middle, and then you have the King of Pens, which is bigger. So this one's seats nicely in the middle. My hands are pretty big. They're about 8 inches long there from wrist to fingertip there. So it feels really good in my hand. They're not super heavy either. These are going to be interesting because they are Maki-e pens, but they're way more affordable than most other Maki-es. And that's part of what's so exciting about them. And part of it too is just the design. The theming is really, really cool. So first thing I wanted to show you is this, the first one, which is Gojo. So this is a black resin base, and the design on here, you know, they're all ninja themed. The design on here is going to be a ninja that's got a silhouette here in front of a full moon, and, you know, jump attacking here with a katana and some shurikens. So very cool colors too. And maybe, you know, you can see it kind of in the, as I'm moving it around, but there's a bit of a little color shift or a little color kind of shimmering that's happening there, which you don't really see that a lot with Maki-e. Now, part of the reason these are less expensive is because there's a combination of sort of like a screen printing type Maki-e and then some handwork as well. So basically, when it comes to any type of Maki-e design, essentially what you're paying for is time. You're paying for the crafts people's time. And the more time it takes, the more expensive the pen gets, and the more elaborate the design may be as well. So these are meant to be on the more like affordable end. So if you like, I mean, it's a 1911L anyway, which is already going to be in that like $300-ish range. And then you get this cool design on top of it. So it's really not that much of a premium to get them with the design. So this particular one has the black ion trim, which is pretty cool. 21 karat nib. So a little bit of softness to it there. Probably about on par with most other 14 or 18 karat nibs that have some softness like Pilot. Yeah, very cool overall design. Cartridge converter pen. If you know the 1911L, this is, you know, just like that, except it has a cool design on it. So that is Gojo. And then we have the next one here. This is In. So this is a blue body. So it's a blue resin base. And this has another ninja here. This one has got a temple or castle. So this would be like the lord who kind of presides over a given land. Got another full moon going on here. You're going to have the ninja who is returning from a mission successfully, I would assume, back to their lord's castle. So, you know, the ninjas were, you know, call them employed, if you will, by their lords to kind of, you know, do some of the dirty work as they needed and just kind of protect the area. So very cool design overall. Doesn't have as much of the color shiftiness that Gojo had, but still a really nice looking pen. And you don't see, I mean, I guess you see the blues a little more, the Maki-e blues a little more common. The black is the most common you're going to see. Now we're going to get into the two that really are a lot more unique. So this one here is Oshiro. So this one is a very deep purple base. So, you know, it's almost like a plum color. It's almost hard to tell that it's even purple, but, you know, very kind of smoky, dusty purple. This one also has the black ion trim, just like Oshiro does, or sorry, just like Gojo does. This one here, you get, hey, guess what? Another full moon. You got a ninja here who's sort of jumping into action. So this is a ninja that's like heading out to the mission, whereas you had In, which was like coming back from the mission. This one is jumping out onto the mission. And then it's got this cool ninja sort of in this like, you know, attack sort of jumping pose. Or maybe he's like, oh, I guess there's grass there. So maybe he's like kneeling on the ground kind of a thing. It's hard to tell. It's a bit abstract in a way. But nice coloration there. I really like this like teal color. That is really cool. So yeah, that is Oshiro. And then the last one we have, which is, you know, the most unique, I think. This is Suki, which is a demonstrator. So it's like a purple demonstrator. So you can see through it. You can see the nib in there. Pretty cool. And I believe I commented a few Q&As back that like you really don't see any Maki-e over demonstrator pens, and how that was something that I really wanted. And well, guess what? This is the one I snagged for myself. So I just couldn't resist. Not only that, but, you know, it looks really cool. The ninjas in some cool poses. You can tell here there's a little bit of that like screen print type thing because the ninja is exactly the same on these two, but the color is different. So clearly they had some like, you know, repeatable kind of patterns there, but then there's a lot of other embellishments beyond that. So I like the coloration of this one because it is like a purple to a teal, like not a teal, turquoise, which is like kind of Goulet colors, to be honest with you. Those are like some of our secondary colors besides the blue, which we're obviously known for. And then it's got another ninja up here in action with a crescent moon. So not a full moon. How about that? Which is kind of cool because then you can like see more of the demonstratoriness of the pen. Rhodium trim on this one, and same with In. But yeah, so all the pens, same price. They all have fine, medium, and medium nibs. That's it. None of the like other embellished nibs like a zoom or anything like that. So a little more straightforward, but the Sailors limited those options. These were really, really popular when they first came out. We were super limited. They're a little less limited now. I'm hoping they have them kind of ongoing, but It's hard to say 100%, but either way, that's these pens. I think they look pretty cool. So glad I was able to show them to you today. Sweet. All right. Little personal stuff here, little Brian's adventures, and then I'll wrap up and I got a fun fact for you. Last week has been pretty okay. I've been pretty busy. So we had Valentine's Day last week. Kept it pretty low key with Rachel. We're pretty busy. We've been together a long time. We're both pretty low maintenance in that respect. So, we did some flowers, we did some stuff, whatever. We spent time together. We did quality time together, but didn't do anything too over the top. So yeah, anyway, that was pretty low key, kept it cool, kept it easy. Right now, just personally, I'm in the middle of development reviews. This is the time of year where, we do our pay evaluations and, we do comp studies and pay range evaluation, all that kind of stuff. So trying to do real business things, things that have nothing to do with pens, but just, taking care of our team and making sure that we're, paying equitably and all these types of things. Takes a lot of research, takes a lot of time. Talk about training, talk about development, all this kind of stuff. So it's a lot of extra time that it takes to do that from a leadership standpoint. We do 360 evaluations. We do manager, 360 evaluations, all these things. It's just a lot of feedback that we take in and then try to absorb and then prepare and give back to our various direct reports. So I have my own to do, and we're just doing them as a whole company. So it's a lot of extra time that takes. So pretty much all my spare time is taken up kind of doing work stuff and that kind of things and family time. So I'm not getting into any big projects right now. So sorry, I don't have any crazy adventures to share at the moment, but the next couple of weeks is pretty much going to be focused on me doing my job. Though I did do one project this past weekend. I had a friend who was getting getting an old deck taken out and getting a screen porch put in. And, it was going to be thousands of dollars for the demo for the old deck. And it was right on the ground. It wasn't a complicated thing. So they worked it out with their contractor. They just got a bunch of friends and they were going to demo the deck and bring it to the dump and save a couple of grand. So, doing a friendly thing, I went and did that. It was early on Saturday morning and it was 32 degrees, super cold, but I don't know, it was kind of fun. Got to destroy a deck and haul it away. That's pretty fun. So I got to do that, though I was pretty sore the rest of the weekend. So I did that. And my truck, a pickup truck, it's an old truck. And I haven't driven it that much and it's been super cold this winter and the batteries were dead. It has 2 batteries on the thing, 2 big batteries. And they were both dead. So I had to, take I think it took me half hour, 45 minutes to charge the thing up and just get it to the point where I could jump it and get it going again. And then it was fine. So that was a fun little adventure out in the cold. And then let's see here. Otherwise, though, the whole project went very smooth sailing. Let's see here. We had President's Day earlier this week. We were closed. Our office was closed, but the kids had school because they've missed so many days because of snow. They're having to add take away holidays and add days back in. So did that. And there was some some volunteer stuff that was planned for that day that I went and helped out at the school. I won't get into any more details of that because I feel kind of weird talking about my kids at this age with school stuff because they're more independent. They're 13 and 15. So it's not like little kids where I'm oh, they're cute and they like this show and whatever. It's now it's well, my kids are getting to the point where they should have more autonomy over what's shared with thousands or tens of thousands of people. I shouldn't be necessarily making that decision for them. So I went and volunteered, at the thing. We offer service hours here. So it's helping out at a school or, any nonprofit, basically. We will provide like extra paid time to be able to do that. So, it's like, I mean, for me, I don't get paid extra to do that because it's me and Rachel's company, but, just trying to still like live by that example a little bit and kind of show our team. So, we do the service hours and it was helpful for the school. So, I did that. So that was part of my day off, but it really wasn't much of a day off. So the next couple of weeks are going to be pretty busy for me, but, I'm still keep up Q&A, still keep doing this thing. So that's it for me. That's all my adventures. Go ahead and wrap this thing up. Keep asking me questions. I got a lot of good questions last week. So I got a pretty good stock of questions, but still keep asking them. I save them all. That way, if we do get in a dry spell, I can go back and reference some old ones. So super helpful. And I just like engaging with you all anyway. So as I close this thing out, my fun facts for the week got me thinking, because we were talking about like the reed pens and all that kind of stuff and bamboo. And, I was researching like how they don't last as long as like a feather quill. And it got me thinking like, that's kind of weird, because I know from my woodworking days that like bamboo is actually a pretty tough material. Maybe not in like when it's wet and kind of writing with it standpoint. But bamboo is really tough. So I did a little bit of research, and I'll just share with you a little bit about bamboo and like wood hardness and stuff like that. So if that totally bores you, just log off now, but just give me a minute or two. So bamboo, is probably the most common use you see for it today, at least in the US, is for flooring. So you see like hardwood floors like, oak and, hickory and, stuff like that, cherry. But bamboo is actually a pretty good option because it's pretty dang tough. Well, how do they know that? Well, there's a scale for measuring the hardness of wood and other wood-like materials like bamboo. So the hardness rating is called the Janka hardness test, Janka. It was created by Austrian-born American researcher Gabriel Janka during his life from 1864 to 1932. I don't know exactly when the Janka scale came in, but it was somewhere in that range. It measures the force required to embed a 11.28 millimeter steel ball halfway into a sample of wood. Now you're like, that is a very specific amount. It's basically a 7/16 of an inch steel ball. The diameter is very specific because it was chosen to produce, a circle with an area of 1 square centimeter. So I guess they just kind of reverse engineered and calculated that. Standard samples that they use for when they do this Janka hardness thing, they take it from the inner heartwood of a tree trunk, measured at about 12% moisture content, because all these things are factors, right? So they try and standardize as much as possible, and they basically measure like the pound-foot pressure that it takes to push this steel ball halfway down into the sample. Very specific, kind of random a little bit, but it does give us, an actual number to measure the hardness of a material like, hardwood or softwood or bamboo. So the Janka scale typically goes from around 0 to about 4,000. There's a couple that are above that though, with a lower number being softer. So the bigger the number, the harder it is, because that's how many pounds per square inch of pressure it takes to mash that thing into it. Bamboo has a Janka hardness between around 1,200 and 14 pounds per square inch, which makes it harder than things like pine, cherry, and walnut. It's around the hardness of white oak. So if you're familiar with white oak, it's a pretty tough wood. Bamboo is that tough, so it's pretty wild. So that's why you see it used in flooring, cutting boards, things like that. Now the softest woods that you'll see are things like basswood, California redwood. They're really soft. You can like dent them with like your fingernail. And the hardest, the densest tropical woods are things like Brazilian walnut and Brazilian ebony. Those get into like the high 3,000s, upward of 4,000 pounds of pressure, which is wild. It's like 10 times harder than redwood. But the hardest wood that's out there is Australian Buloke. I think it's called Buloke, Buloke. I've actually never used that wood or heard much about it, but it's over 5,000 pounds of pressure it takes for the Janka scale. That's basically like rock. It's so tough. The hardest wood that I personally, because I'm a woodworker, the hardest wood I've ever personally worked with is called Catalox. It's a Mexican ebony, and that sucker is 3,660 pounds, or 3,660 on the Janka hardness. And I had to like chisel some stuff by hand. I used it to make like an insert for my table saw because I wanted it to be like wood. I wanted it to be like a zero clearance insert. If you don't know woodworking, don't worry about any of this, but if you do, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So, I made an insert for my table saw, raised the blade up in it, and then there's literally no excess like edging around the blade. So if there's like little slivers of wood, they won't get caught in there or anything. It's a much better, safer way to have it, but I wanted to make it of really tough wood so that it'd be very, very durable. So anyway, I had to like custom fabricate that thing. And a lot of it was like handwork, chiseling and stuff. I really felt like I was chiseling stone. It was crazy. And that's not even the hardest wood out there. So that's pretty wild. But anyway, bamboo is pretty darn tough. So yeah, even as tough as it is, Still not as tough as writing implements. So it makes you appreciate things like a stainless steel nib. You know, that stuff's pretty tough. Anyway, that's all I got for this week. Thanks so much for hanging in there, and I hope you really enjoyed this Q&A. Thanks for watching, and right on. I'll see you in 300.